Welcome to News, the Week in Review. And those were scenes from Senekal, which featured in news this past week, following the brutal murder of a young farm manager, Brendan Horner, and also then two people who appeared in court because of that murder and charged with his murder. And, things got out of hand a bit. We'll be talking about that in a moment. But as you can see, tempers flared up, and it's been all over the news, so let's have a look at it. Our guests tonight, we're talking to Chris van Zyl, he's Deputy General Manager of TLUSA. Chris, welcome to Week in Review. We're also talking to the DA's Deputy, or rather Shadow Minister of Agriculture, and that's Annette Steyn. Hello, Annette. And then also looking at Christopher Areda, who's been on the program before. He's the Executive Director of Agri-SA. So organized agriculture well represented here today. And looking at what happened at Senekal, I want to put it to my guests. Oh, of course, my fellow presenter, I always left him out here, as usual, is Piet Krokop, Dr. Piet Krokop of Northwest University. Sorry, Piet, you're still here. But looking at what happened in Senekal, the issue of farm attacks, farm murders, and everything around that has been with us for a number of years, a long time, actually. We got the feeling in this past month or two that things have suddenly escalated again, and culminating in, as I said, the brutal murder of Brendan Horner, a young 21-year-old farm manager. I want to put it to the panel. Is that your feeling as well, that things have escalated, that suddenly, I think this last month or just more than a month, 10 murders on farms? What that we know of? Who wants to Chris?
If I can respond, thank you very much, Kobus. In my studies, there's an indication that we've been saddled with farm attacks since 1985. This culminated in a summit with the then President Mandela in about 1997-98, thereabouts, during which farm attacks, and I'm now talking about the violent crime component of farm attacks, was classified as a national priority crime. I think if we look what has happened since, and I must immediately say, the day before the Senekal protest, both Agri-SA, ourselves, and AfriForum had a meeting with the National Police Commissioner to discuss several issues which we regarded as important. One of them being whether farm attacks still carry the etiquette of a national priority crime. And this was as a result when the Minister of Police said at Normandin the week before that farm attacks is not a national priority crime. The mere fact that that happened before Senekal is indicative of the, let me call it, the outrage that is continuing to this date. If I look at the statistics, we are losing about one farmer every week, and this has been ongoing for the last 30 years, back to my database dates back to 1 January 1990.
Christo?
Kobus, yes, no, this is a very, very big concern for us at Agri-SA. And Chris has referred to the meeting that we've held with the police. The reports that I received from that meeting, that was very, very positive. There were a number of actions that were sort of scheduled and that the police commissioner was to initiate. And I felt very good at that stage when my team reported back to me that there's things going to happen. Just a week before that, we had that unfortunate incidents in KZN, where the minister made specific pronouncements and utterances, and that led to escalation in tensions. On that specific day, I think Free State Agriculture, TAU, and a whole lot of other organized agricultural structures were present at the court. And people were there to, first and foremost, be part of the gathering, to show their support, to sympathize with the family, because this was extraordinarily brutal. The Black friends of Brendan had the most beautiful messages to say on social media, because they regarded him as a very, very kind person. And that for me, once I've read all of these things and once I've experienced what has happened in Senekal, it really broadened my mind. In fact, I wrote about it today in a report where I said, we've got a massive, massive crime problem in this country. And yes, farmers, farm workers in many instances, rural communities are facing the brunt of it. And the last thing that we need to do is to have this divisive talk that is a black versus white issue. This is an issue between criminals on the one side and law-abiding citizens on the other side. And I think one should be very careful, and I think the media has sort of played into that space where they want to sort of polarize communities against each other and ministers against each other, and the EFF and the ANC has fallen into that trap by making this a white issue. What I want to emphasize is we are really at the cliff in terms of social stability in this country if we allow crime, whether it's on the Cape Flats, whether it's on the townships, whether it's on farms, if we allow these things to escalate. Because people across the color line, people from all communities, law-abiding citizens are really at a point where they are fed up with what is happening in this country. No one feels safe. And I think this should be the basis in terms of the framework in which we have to frame this discussion, this particular discussion, because I think on the one hand, yes, we need to continue engaging with the police. We need to continue engaging, with the lawmakers in this country to find ways and means to address this issue. On the other hand, we need to also address the economic factors that in some cases drive this kind of behavior, but that shouldn't be excuse for the terrible murders that are being committed. But thirdly, we need to also drive this thing at the political level to avoid the situation where some political leaders and some political parties exploit this, and then we sit with a polarized situation between various communities, between black and white, and that can really take this country over the tipping point. And that is something that we cannot afford at this point in time.
Chris, I wonder if there's a third factor. I understand this law-abiding citizens vis-a-vis criminals, but there's another factor. On the Cape Flats, gangsters and criminals manage, if I can use the word of the minister, Becky Cele, manage a society together with the criminals and together with the police. And in the taxi industry, the criminals and the taxi industry and the police are working quite nicely together sometimes. And there is absolutely no doubt that criminals are also involved in stock theft in South Africa, but so is the police. So if one seeks to find a solution to this problem, where do you start? Annette, maybe you can tell me.
Can I come in? Yeah. Can I come in, Quibus?
Yes, please.
Yes, I just want to go back quickly to your first question about the increase in is it the increase that we are seeing or not? When I became involved in the whole issue of rural crime, was about 7 years ago, and I can remember at the time we had an average of about 48 murders in South Africa per day. We are now on 59. So I think murder violence has increased in South Africa. It's not only in rural areas and not only in farms. I think what has happened is with social media and the connectivity that people have and immediately getting spread across the country, a lot more people is aware of the farm murders that's happening and taking place. And that, for one thing, I think is what is increasing the tensions and the violence and people feeling more and more as if more and more farm murders is happening. So that is one of the issues that I think is very important. The second thing is definitely the issue of stock theft and general theft on farms and the involvement of the police. It's causing a mistrust between farmers, not only white farmers, black farmers, small-scale farmers, all farmers in rural communities that deal with especially stock theft, but it's not only stock. I know of areas where people come in and overnight they come and harvest the whole orchard or harvest all the maize that is on the field. So farmers feel more and more on their own. There's an increase in mistrust. There's an increase in the fact that they don't even want to go to the police. I know that about 3 weeks ago, I met with a lot of farmers in Northwest, in an area where cattle is being chased into the veld on a daily basis, exactly what is happening in Normandin, and that the police is not treating that as an urgency because people don't think it's important, that, you know, grazing is just being used. So maybe training of the police I think they're also not well trained. I looked at what happened at Senekal, and the police were definitely not prepared for a crowd and controlling crowd there.
Well, Annette, you can train a criminal policeman. It's not going to help a lot because there's a lot of criminalization in the police. Chris, if this crime, if attacks on farms are declared a priority crime, what will change?
I think at the time when it was declared a national priority crime, we still had the capacity of the commandos. When the commandos was disbanded in 2003, I remember a very senior policeman saying to me that most of the commando members who acted within the reaction platoons of the various commandos, in fact, just need to change their uniforms and move over to the police reservists. But what we saw in practice is the capacity provided in the past by that section of the police were redirected for other purposes. And in fact, one of the issues that we've been taking up with the police is whether they won't consider what we call an agricultural-friendly police reservist system, meaning that the reservists need not rush to the nearest police station, which might be 30 or 40 kilometers away, to be inspected before being put on duty. But a telephone call might suffice for that purpose. This was received extremely well by the National Commissioner during a previous discussion, but unfortunately, nothing has come from it. And to the best of my knowledge, sorry?
Yeah, let me ask you something. If you look at the behavior of the farmers in Senekal, why would we trust farmers with such a militarized role? Because it's obvious that a lot of farmers can't be trusted, and that a lot of people will just, in some other way, act in a racist way, which will make the whole system to collapse. Because you only need one incident for that system to be discredited and for the state not to be able to afford that politically. How can you trust the farmers if you look what's happened to Senekal?
Well, for many years, more than 2 decades now, farmers have organized themselves in farm watches, similar to community watches in towns and cities. And that, in fact, is the first line of response, because in practice, should an incident occur on a farm, your nearest source of assistance is your neighbor. If you go to many of the police stations in rural areas, there are no vehicles or personnel available to respond to that scene of the crime or to intercept the criminals escaping from the scene of the crime. So farm watches, in fact, has taken to a large extent over the role to ensure a degree of rural safety, not only for the farmer, but also for the farm workers and other rural dwellers.
In fact, I just want to add what Chris is saying. I visited one of the areas in Northwest where Agri Securitas has sponsored a command center. In that command center, you have various television sets or screens, and they pick up, movement in various areas. But the benefit of those tele or camera systems and television screen systems is go way beyond just safeguarding your farmers, because it has picked up fires, it has protected the working communities and local communities, and in many instances there's a lot of cooperation between the various stakeholders in those areas, and even the police are alerted when that camera picks up a stolen vehicle. So the assumption, Pete, that a small group of people, their emotions ran away with them on Saturday, on that specific day in Senekal, that shouldn't be regarded as the norm. In most instances where Agri Securitas, together with TAU and together with other stakeholders, put up systems and get communities collaborating and working together to safeguard everyone in that specific area, that has achieved a lot of success. And the goodwill is there between the police and private security, and as well as that command centers that has been established over time. And I think what we should do is not to be dismissive about it, but rather to build on that and to get further cooperation and strengthen the hand of everyone involved in that specific space, so that everyone can feel safe and do what they do best, and that is to provide food to the country.
No, the reason why
I want to agree with that. Sorry, Pete. I want to agree with that sentiment. One of the issues that we have seen, and I spoke about it, is about the mistrust between the police and farmers or rural communities. And when you start building it by including people in your structures, it's not that we want the farming structures to function on their own. They must be part of an organized police structure. And I believe if you look at the areas where things go well between the police and farmers, where there's a good working relationship, people work well together, it's also the areas where I think crime is not as high as in other areas. If we visit areas, the moment I visit, before even I arrive there, I know that there's very bad relationships between the police and the community, because if you look at the stats of the crime. So I really believe that is the way forward. We need to get the reservists back into the structures so that people can work better together.
Well, let's let Annette gather her wits there. But the question is still in my mind, Christo and Chris. Rapport also reported today on an investigation, a private investigation, a report that went and has been laying on the desk of the Commissioner of Police, apparently, for some time now, alleging that police in that area, in Senekal, Polrus, and those areas, are actively involved in crime. We've already referred to that. What worries me is that there's been no reaction at all to that report. It's simply laying there and gathering dust.
I've seen a report on social media regarding the situation in the Cape Flats, where a serving police member has explained that within the police, there are two different factions belonging to the same political party, but strongly opposing each other, and in fact, neutralizing the efforts by the other group. I've seen the intimation in today's Sunday newspaper regarding the Senekal situation about SAPS members actively involved in stock theft. Now, one of the questions which we posed to the National Commissioner is the utilization of crime intelligence, because in all these farm attacks, we've seen many of them being executed by criminals traveling several hundred kilometers from a totally different area where they reside to the target area. And they are in possession of quite accurate information regarding the routine and the layout of the homestead and that kind of thing. So what I'm trying to say is that if we cannot get behind the organized component of agriculture-related crime, amongst others, and to look at what the true motive is, because the thing we haven't touched upon is the level of violence compared to the obvious motive for the crime. They take money and they take a firearm, maybe cell phones, but the victims are really tortured to the extreme. Now, that doesn't make sense. And it's in this regard that we requested the National Police Commissioner whether they will not consider tasking crime intelligence within the police to get behind motive and to get behind the organized component of crime as we are experiencing it at the moment. And if that report in today's Sunday newspaper has any truth in it, then there's reason to believe that some of the culprits are in actual fact wearing uniform.
Chris, I just have bad news for you in one way, and that is police intelligence doesn't really exist anymore. So if you're going to wait till Judgment Day for that one. I was wondering about technology, Chris, too. And what does Agri-SA do, for instance, to in some other way spread the presence of technology in rural areas, to plan it at least, and then also part of that technology is to set up a system between farmers and the police system, just to coordinate the thing just beyond your offices? Or do you more or less allow farmers or your regional officers to control this master plan to face crime in some other way on farms?
Agri-SA collaborates with TAU on a number of fronts. The first one is obviously Agri-Securitas. It's an institution within the broader Agri-SA, or let me rather say broader organized agricultural grouping. And Agri-Securitas is funded by various institutions. We have recently received quite a nice sum of money from a big sponsor. So your farm at local level, what is it called now? Farmer unions at local level, they will then apply for funding. And that funding is utilized for the acquisitioning of all kinds of technology, whether it's cameras, whether it's infrared binoculars, it's for all kinds of other systems. In fact, we are currently having a discussion with some of the, some experts that can assist us with all kinds of cell phone technologies. Now, one doesn't want to, let the cat out of the bag when it comes to all these kind of technologies, but all of these things are happening. And organized agriculture are taking hands. We also, in certain areas, there's also engagements between Agri-SA, TAU, your AFASAs of the world, as well as your NAFUs of the world. And it was quite a nice experience one day when we engaged on television where black farmers said, but here, we're taking hands with white farmers to help protect our assets, because all of them are victims of crime in some way or another. And, the sad part of it all is that and I've heard horrible stories where your black farmers go so far to take the law in their own hands, and then they would give anyone that is sort of guilty of this type of crime, they punish them and punish them severely. Now, that is not the route where on which we want to embark on, because that is dangerous and it's against the law. We cannot take the law in our own hands. But what I want to really emphasize, Pete, is that if we can get more funding into this space, and yes, together with TAU, together with AFASA and NAFU, we will have to go on a major drive to get funding, and that funding must specifically be used to set up all kinds of systems to protect farmers and farm workers in a particular area. And it is of great benefit to local communities as well.
Maybe I just want to make one more point, if you allow me to, Kobus, and that is I hear the argument often, and I think Chris raised it now, the brutality of these crimes, the torture, the way that people are being killed. The only reason why people sometimes think that this brutality is of a very specific nature is because they haven't studied crime in South Africa. In fact, crime in South Africa is brutal, is sometimes a lot more brutal than what we see on farms. If you read, and I've read some dockets in Alexandra, you see it's savage. You can't believe what is happening there. So white South Africans or farmers are not targeted with a specific type of vengeance as far as the statistics about the nature of crime is concerned. What happens on farms is what happens in Alexandra and everywhere else in South Africa, isn't it? Anit?
Pete, I would like to see that studies. I agree in one sense that the nature of murders in South Africa is terrible. And I said earlier that there's 59 murders a day on average in South Africa. And the problem is that we haven't compared all of this. And that is why I think it is extremely important that some kind of research and study is being done. Comparing areas of violence and crime, looking at the reasons behind it. I think we are not even sure all the time why the taxi violence is going on. We know that there's a lot of crime, there's syndicates involved in South Africa. Are they maybe linked to each other? I've always said one of the reasons why we don't know what is going on farms is what is it that the criminals is actually looking for? If you see that sometimes no one, they don't even steal something. So I'm not always sure it's normal criminals coming in to steal money or TVs or cell phones to sell it. But people are looking for something else. They're looking for weapons and they're looking for money. So what are they using it for? Where are they involved? Are they involved in other crimes somewhere else? And then lastly, what is the reason for the brutality of that? I think it is quite important that we get to that. Because, if you will only know that once you have a proper study of all the crime and murders in South Africa, and I don't think we have one.
I think Professor Zinn said the other day on this television that somebody or this program, that the person that they eventually catch after committing a crime usually was active as a criminal for around about 7 years before he's being caught. And every time he gets involved in another crime, it tends to become more brutal, more specific, more targeted, more confident. And he has explained that the interviews that they've done with criminals involved in farm attacks, usually a very small percentage of them have a political motive, but by far the largest percentage of them are really seasoned criminals which sees farmers as a soft target. They live in it. They're distant. It might take a long time before somebody arrives. They probably have guns there, and somebody who's been involved in crime for a long time. They would like to have a gun. There's usually money involved. And this pattern is rather established and predictable.
My question then would be, what hope, given the utterances of our Minister of Police at Normandin and elsewhere, what hope do we have that we'll have a proper reaction from the police and cooperation from the police side to solve this? That would be the one question. And at the same time, then, if we can't trust that, what would be the solution? Who's going to solve it?
If I may speak off, sorry, Annette.
Chris, yeah.
No, I just wanted to say that the first item on the agenda for our discussion with the National Police Commissioner was the issue of mutual trust, because there are places, many more than what we can think, where there is a very sound cooperation between the farming community, the police, and the private security industry. I think those three parties operate in many areas in a well-coordinated way. In our own National Agricultural Security Strategy, we've also made mention of integration within the CPF, because that is the only forum on local level where all the role players could be represented and where activities could be coordinated. So we are strong proponents of the CPF to play a role in that regard. It hasn't happened everywhere, but we need to push it in that direction. And I'm quite sure that that will bring renaments for us.
But I just want to add the first question that you've asked, this whole issue of brutality. I've worked on the Cape Flats for the bigger part of my working life. And there I've sort of learned about the most brutal attacks on innocent people, innocent girls. In fact, that's why, to a certain extent, couldn't take it anymore, because you have to go home with all of those terrible, terrible thoughts, and then you have to then relate to your family again and try to lead a normal life. So the brutality of crime all over South Africa is really, something unnatural to a large extent. The second issue that I want to emphasize is we should not dismiss that there are certain elements that have a political motive. Because we've picked it up, we've experienced it, we were also informed about this. So that is something that we will have to watch very carefully, and obviously every case has to be assessed and be analyzed in terms of its specific context. The third issue that I want to emphasize is ministers, political parties must now really be called to task, because it's unacceptable that they continue to exploit these kind of situations for narrow-minded and cheap politically. And for me, that is unacceptable, because they are going to be, they're going to learn in a very hard way that a broad spectrum of South Africans, poor, rich, white, pink, yellow, doesn't matter. Broad spectrum of people are really fed up with the way things are going in this country. And that's why we have called on President Ramaphosa to start showing leadership, to clamp down on ministers that are racializing this issue, and to clamp down on police commissioners who are not doing their job. Yes, we've got a very good relationship with the police, but the problem is at grassroots level. And that lack of accountability is not only prevalent within your police stations, but is prevalent in almost every state institution. And that is driving this whole issue of hopelessness, that feeling of desperateness in this country. And I think we should start coming together as a collective and start addressing these issues and confront your political leaders to say, but now is the time to move away and steer away from politicizing and racializing issues, but to focus on accountability, focus on economic growth, focus on this big issue of unemployment in this country. Those are the real issues that everyone should start focusing on.
Chris, there is
also, if I can come in, but also I think it's Pete that touched on it, that a criminal in South Africa, once, by the time usually he's involved in murder, he's been involved in criminality for about 7 years. It's one of the issues that we, from my political party, is currently doing and looking at what we call court watching briefs. Looking at when, in the case of a farm murder, a person gets to court, what was his history up till then? And it is very clear that by the time a person murders someone, it's not his first crime in this case. So we will have to look at the whole of our justice system. How does it work? I know, for instance, in the case of one of the murders, last murders in the Eastern Cape, the person, one of the accused, has murdered someone last year. He's walking around outside. They're waiting for DNA, they're waiting for this and the next and the following. So it's not only the mistrust between the police and farming communities, but it's also the way our justice system functions. And I think it's a bigger issue that needs to be handled. And it can't be just the Minister of Police. And that's why it's important that all politicians get involved in this, because it's not about only crime for farmers. As we said earlier, it's the 59 people per day that gets murdered in South Africa. All the women that's being raped on a constant basis, I don't even know what the stats for that is. There's a problem in South Africa, and we need to all work together to fix that.
But there's also just one last thing. After Minister Kelly was at Normandy, the rumor went around, and it was spread by people, I think, with malicious intent, that the minister would have said that farmers shouldn't complain when they get hurt, or something to that effect. So it's not only the minister, I think, that one should be careful for when it comes to expressing views that can stoke the fires. There are political groupings amongst those associated with some farm groupings that do spread such rumors with the intent to stir the trouble even further. That type of expression.
Can I come in there? That thing worried me specifically. And after Minister Cele now said on Friday, he didn't say that, I found 3 farmers in KZN and I asked them, what did he say? And they all speak perfect Zulu. So it's not lost in translation. That's what he said. He said that a lot of things, but he did say, don't think, you must come crying when you get hurt. I'm going to ask him that specific question in a written form in Parliament.
There were other Zulu-speaking people there too. There were journalists there too. And all of them say it's not true. And News 24 has investigated the matter, and they have found that it's not true. It's a rumor being spread by some farmers to cause trouble.
I'll find out. I'm not going to just leave it there.
I'll be glad.
I think it's worth following up on that, but I think we agree with the sentiment in general that everybody needs to be careful now what they say and how they say it. But still looking at what's going on, you spoke about the farmers at Senekal earlier on, and yes, I think most people agree that what happened there shouldn't have happened. But isn't it also just a sign of people getting to a point where they are so frustrated they don't see any results really? When they complain about things and when they're attacked, sooner or later this thing does boil up, and you will have hot-headed people who overreact and do things like they did at Senekal.
They must be punished severely, because if you can use that for an excuse, the criminal can use hunger for an excuse to commit a murder. Those farmers should be punished severely, and we should refrain from doing that. It doesn't solve the problem. It just confirmed the problem of the situation where people that can claim frustration can commit murders, crimes, atrocities. Frustration is never an excuse to commit another crime.
Can I then? Yeah, Chris?
I just want to make a comment. The day after Senekal, there was also some activity in Bronkhorstspruit that was reported on the news. That went off very well, to such an extent, much to my surprise, that COSATU even joined the farmers in expressing their dissatisfaction with the situation. So whilst we should focus on Senekal as being the banner for what is going wrong, we should maybe also look at the other places where things are done correctly.
You're very right, yes.
My other question would also be that if these farmers should be punished severely, surely then, looking at what's been happening in our country over the past years, we've seen a number of similar situations by other groupings, and we're still waiting for some form of punishment to be exacted. So in general, I think it goes back to the application of the rule of law in South Africa consistently.
Yes, I think that is also part of the problem. I agree. They must be punished. You can't take the law into your own hands.
Indeed, because that leads to.
It needs to happen, in all cases. I know that a lot of people are still now comparing what happened in the Click saga and whatever. The point is, those men in Zastron damaged a police or court,
Senekal,
Yeah, in Senekal, sorry. Now I'm in Zastron. In Senekal, they damaged a state property and a court and police, and that in itself made worse.
I think maybe somebody didn't like what there she is. She's back with us.
Yeah.
I think she disappeared for a moment.
Okay, it's maybe the people in Senekal. It is a bit more problematic in the sense that the state would react quicker, but we are busy comparing what happened in other protests at police stations and whether the police did slam down as easily and quickly on the farmers there. Not that you, as I say, not that you say one crime is better than another, but I agree they must be dealt with harshly, and but not to make a point and then leave other people out if they've done similar things.
And that was Annette Steyn. She's the deputy, or rather the shadow minister for the DA in Parliament.
But I just want to add,
Christo, go on. Christo, go ahead.
No, he was probably talking to somebody else.
I just want to. Yes, I've read. Yeah, I've read very interesting studies about vigilantism, and now my English is also up, as I say, down in the West Coast. but you know, it happens everywhere and all over the country, and the root cause of that type of vigilantism is the fact that people start feeling isolated. People feel that they are not getting heard. People see the double standards that are being practiced. And, you know, one moment, one day in particular, people just lose their cool and they start doing the wrong thing. Now, there's no justification for it. But I want to emphasize, if we really want to build South Africa as a law-abiding nation, going forward, then I think we must make sure that we maintain law and order and that we do not fall into that trap of applying double standards, because that at the end of the day leads to this kind of emotional outburst. People lose their cool completely, and you just need somebody there that is the naughty one, that at the end of the day find a way to get a small grouping emotionally involved that at the end of the day they do these kind of things, burn trucks or burn a building or damage and vandalizing things. And the sad part of it is that us as leaders, we must refrain from that incitement as well, because we then easily walk away whilst the guilty parties are then in court and they have to answer for themselves. And I think that is absolutely unfair. And Julius Malema and people within the ANC, they must know that if they do that kind of thing, it is coward. It is really cowardice to do something like that, to incite people and then walk away. To call on people to take up arms, it's unacceptable. And I think us as law-abiding citizens, we need to change the narrative around that and drive that point home all the time.
Well, I think that's a good point where we can end this program. I want to say thanks to Christo van der Rede, the Executive Director of Agri-SA. We also had Chris van Zyl, Deputy GM, General Manager of TAU SA, and Annette Steyn, Shadow Minister of the DA in Parliament, and Piet Krokamp, my fellow presenter and commentator. I'd like to thank everybody for a very interesting discussion today. And Week in Review will be back next Sunday at 5. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Grumpy Old Homo Show.
Yeah, and we are in Pride Month.
We are in Pride Month, and tonight
celebrating queers.
Queers,
all
queers.
that is queer.
So we're doing a fundraiser on the 29th of October. Kindly hosted by I Love Melville .live, and there's sponsored food and drink.
Entertainment.
We've got the Avalon Quartet. We've got the Mamas.
Lilo's going to perform.
And Robert Whitehead. That's his city, I tell you. There was everybody everywhere.